Nuranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanuranjana Jamunatiravana Chadi Jamunatiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dadi 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 Yasodanandana Brajajanuranjana Yasodanandana Brajajanuranjana Yamuna Tira Ganachadi Yamuna Tira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jayom Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing this morning, Canto 11, Uddhava Gita, Chapter 10, Text 24. We're going to cover several verses this morning. The discussion is Krishna is discouraging for a whole series of verses, 6 verses, something like that, aspiring for heavenly planets because, discouraging because. Text 24. Having achieved the heavenly planets, the performer of ritualistic sacrifices travels in a glowing airplane, which he obtains as a result of his piety on earth, being glorified by songs sung by the Gandharvas and dressed in wonderfully charming clothes. He enjoys life surrounded by heavenly goddesses. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. After ascending to the heavenly planets, one who has previously performed numerous sacrifices will ride in an effulgent celestial chariot which he is awarded as a result of his past pious activities. He is glorified by the Gandharvas and dressed in gorgeous clothing as he enjoys life in the company of heavenly damsels. And the commentary is very short. The word Devi in this verse refers to the Apsaras, or celestial women, or Devi or Devi Nam, this plural. Text 25. Accompanied by heavenly women, the enjoyer of the fruits of sacrifice goes on pleasure rides in a wonderful airplane, which is decorated with circles of tinkling bells, and which flies wherever he desires, being relaxed, comfortable, and happy in the heavenly pleasure gardens. He does not consider that he is exhausting the fruits of his piety and will soon fall down to the mortal world. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. In the company of celestial women, the enjoyer of the results of sacrifice travels to heavenly gardens in a wonderful airplane which is decorated with circles of tinkling bells and which moves according to his desire. Being relaxed, comfortable, and happy in heavenly pleasure gardens, he does not consider that he is exhausting the results of his previously acquired piety and will soon fall down to the mortal world. And commentary, the phrase kama yana means traveling at will in his celestial airplane. Text 26. Until his pious results are used up, the performer of sacrifice enjoys life in the heavenly planets. When the pious results are exhausted, however, he falls down from the pleasure gardens of heaven, being moved against his desire by the force of eternal time. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. For as long as his pious merit remains, the performer of sacrifice enjoys life in the heavenly planets. When his pious merit is exhausted, however, he falls down from the pleasure gardens of heaven, being moved against his will by the force of eternal time. And commentaries again short. Being driven by time, when again falls down to this planet of birth and death, he is made to fall chalitaha by time. Now here's an interesting reference to this, and the next verse coming up. This is from Raghava Pandit Goswami, Sri Hari Bhakti Ratna Prakash. Text 1. This is text 1 through 11. First part, text 1 through 11. When some people hear these words, they may say, there are many demigods. There are many different pilgrimage places. There are many different kinds of religious activity. Of all kinds of worship, the worship of the demigod Brahma is the best. How is it that you glorify the service of Sri Krishna's lotus feet? Paragraph. Those who are devoted to Sri Krishna's lotus feet may reply. The Vedic literatures explain that the demigods who enjoy various kinds of sense gratification in the upper planetary systems are not immortal. They are all subject to death. For this reason, how can anyone derive lasting benefit from worshipping them? Unquote. This is discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.10.26 as follows. That's our verse. Until his pious results are used up, the performer of sacrifice enjoys life in the heavenly planets. Now, this is someone that goes to heavenly planets, not a demigod, but it's in the planet of the demigods. Detail. When the pious results are exhausted, however, he falls down from the pleasure gardens of heaven, being moved against his desire by the force of eternal time. This is also explained in Bhagavad Gita 9:20-21, where the personality of Godhead says, 2 verses, "Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. They take birth on the planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights." And then the next, "When they have thus enjoyed heavenly sense pleasure, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, through the Vedic principles, they achieve only flickering happiness." Next, what is the use of worshipping Brahma and the other demigods? This rhetorical question is posed in the following statement, coming up text 30 of this chapter, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, "Ordinary people, the planetary leaders that live for a kalpa," what kalpa is a day of Brahma, or even Lord Brahma, who lives for 2 prarardhas. 2 prarardhas. So the duration of the universe is divided in half. 1 prarardha, 2 prarardha. So half, 1 prarardha is half of Brahma's life, 50 years. How long is that? 2 prarardhas? 311 trillion, 40 billion years. So even Brahma, who lives for 2 prarardhas, fears me. That's coming up in text 30. What is the use of going on pilgrimage? ? Shukadeva Goswami says, Srimad Bhagavatam 12:3-48, quote, "By acquiring transcendental knowledge, performing austerities, controlling the breath, becoming friendly to all, bathing in holy places, observing vows, giving charity, and chanting mantras, one does not become as purified as when the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead stays in his heart." Meaning, he's already there, but when we're conscious. This is also described in the following statement of Brihan Naradiya Purana. Quote, "What is the use of worshipping the demigods? What is the use of studying scriptures? What is the use of bathing in holy places? What is the use of austerities? What is the use of sacrifices? What is the use for those who have no devotion for Krishna?" Next, the Lord describes religious rituals in these words. It's a few chapters later, 11:14-22. Quote, "Religious activities performed with honesty and kindness, or transcendental knowledge coupled with austerity, do not completely purify a heart who has no devotion to me." Next, this is also confirmed in the following verse of Srimad Bhagavatam 10:47, where Sriman Uddhava says, "Krishna is the goal of all kinds of pious activities and ritualistic performances, such as giving in charity, rigidly following austerity of vows, undergoing severe penances, and igniting the fire of sacrifice. Krishna is the purpose behind the chanting of different mantras, the reading of the Vedas, controlling the senses, and concentration of the mind in meditation. These are some of the many different processes for self-realization and attainment of perfection of life, but actually they're only meant for realizing Krishna and dovetailing oneself in transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Next, Srimad Bhagavatam again confirms this in the following words. 1:2:8. Quote, the occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Next. One cannot obtain anything actually good or auspicious without service to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. Brahma and the demigods are all subject to death, and by worshipping them, one will remain subject to death. Themselves being mortal, how can they grant immortality to their worshippers? In the same way, simply by performing austerities, religious rituals, and pious works, one remains in the clutches of the laws of karma without any hope of liberation. This is confirmed by Maharaj Muchukunda, who offers the following prayer to Lord Krishna in 10th Canto, Chapter 51, quote, My dear Lord, I therefore pray that I may simply be engaged in rendering transcendental loving service unto your lotus feet, which is the ambition of the pure devotees who are freed from all kinds of material contamination. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you can offer me anything I want, including liberation. But who is such a foolish person that after pleasing you, he would ask from you something which might be the cause of entanglement in this material world? Final reference to this morning's verse, or one of the morning verses, text 26, is from a book that's published that includes selected prayers or verses from Gaudiya Vaishnav followers, Gaudiya Kantahara. And it's under the section of Abhideya Tattva, Abhideya, process of devotional service. And it's a different rendering of the same. As long as the piety accumulated from good karma is plentiful, he enjoys opulent pleasures in the heavenly planets. When the accumulated piety of his good karma is exhausted, his time for enjoyment is finished, and he again falls down from heaven. And it's going to go on tomorrow. Well, I believe we'll finish this section where it's kind of like compare contrast kind of teaching method. I mean, that's a phrase that I learned from Burijan Prabhu. He wrote a book, The Art of Teaching. It's like a thick book. He spent 10 years preparing and researching and writing, because he was involved at that time with the Gurukul and how do you teach, the art of teaching. And in the book, or I more remember the discussion during the class, it was a one month long class. There's different standard methodologies that are used in education. And one of them is compare contrast. You want to understand something? It's kind of like a metaphor. You use something that's known and you use that to help understand something that's not yet known. And then the contrast is, well, it's not identical, but these are the parts that are similar. So it's an education tool. So what Krishna is doing with Uddhava is, as promised at the very beginning, he's going to explain how to achieve the consciousness of the Avaduta Brahman. And the Avaduta Brahman was most elevated in transcendence, completely detached from all that is temporary. So if you're going to, the how to requires understanding pitfalls. To get from point A to point B, watch out for this and that. There's sharks over here and alligators over there and snipers over there, and you want to get to point B, you have to be watchful of the dangers. So that one of the dangers of attaining the consciousness like the Avadhuta Brahman is attraction for the temporary. And starting with the body, but you may want to get an upgrade body, but it has the same pitfalls. So Krishna's just detailing what's the consequence of those who follow that. It's Vedic. It's not to be scolded or reprimanded or something. The followers of the Vedas that are doing the rituals that lead to the heavenly planets, it's Vedic, which is exactly what Narada said to Vyas. What you said is correct. You get an A in your exam. But inordinate emphasis in encouraging people to enjoy because they already have the spirit to enjoy. And rather than giving them the understanding of what the purpose behind those rituals are, the purpose behind those rituals is ultimately is to come to the stage where one will want eternal service. It goes something like this. Supposing somebody's attached to the temporary and they're suffering. And in the course of time, somebody says, hey, you should learn from the Vedas because it'll teach you how to overcome suffering and come to happiness. It's like, a little bell is ringing. One devotee in China likes to do book distribution, and they inform me of some of the things they do. So they keep books in case they find somebody that's ready for a book, but otherwise they have a card and they encourage people to chant the mantra. They show the mantra on the card. So one time she said, somebody asked, what's the meaning of the mantra? And when you're in China, there's certain things you don't say unless you know the person. And so she said creatively, it teaches about the 6 opulences. And the person said, oh, I want opulence. Teach me the mantra. So the devotee was asking me, is that cheating? It's true. Now, what their idea of opulence is and what your idea of opulence is and what the mantra does and so forth, that's okay. They're quite different. But it's true. What you're saying is true. So the picture of the Vedas that does deal with karma kanda, like 90+% of the Vedas deals with karma kanda rituals that are propitiating the demigods to get something. This is part of the desire tree of the Vedas because you get anything you want from that desire tree. It's a desire tree. But there's a higher purpose behind those things that unless it's made very clear, which Krishna is doing here, unless it's made very clear, people think that's it. The purpose of the Vedas is to get good stuff from the desire tree. So there isn't anything more than that. Krishna says that the way most people think. So now Krishna is giving Uddhava a different picture, or he's giving us a different picture. If it stops there, that just worship the demigods so that you can increase your piety and enjoy in this life and go to the next life and then fall down again to this life, this mortal realm. That's not the purpose. What's the purpose if that's not the purpose? What possibly could be the purpose? And it goes like this. If one is interested in material enjoyment, listen to the logic or the sequence. One is interested in material enjoyment, and they're finding, too much suffering instead of enjoyment. And they hear from somebody, here's an opportunity to get enjoyment. And so, like this person that said, yeah, I want opulent life. Tell me this mantra again. So, they want opulence. They want to be the enjoyers of the temporary. And if some faith goes to A and B in the Vedic culture, to the Vedas, the source of which is Narayana, and a Brahmana that can help them perform those rituals, so a learned person, Vidvan, a person with knowledge, then they start to think beyond the temporary, meaning, enjoy in this life, and then maybe I can enjoy in the next life. And then a little light goes on that says, wait a minute, what's going to go to the next life? That's the soul. As consciousness becomes less covered or more elevated, then the question starts to go to that which we really are, not just enjoying the enjoyer, but we're the soul. And so that leads the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, if done properly over some period of time, leads to the Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas, which deals with the soul proper and what's in the best interest of the soul proper. And as that becomes elevated, particularly with the association of a Vaishnav, then it can lead to devotion to Krishna. That's the flow. The bottom of the pyramid is the unregulated everybody. And then a notch above the unregulated everybody is people who live by regulations under the codes of the Vedas. And then those that want the fruit of following the codes of the Vedas, that's the elevationists, material elevationists. And then the material elevationists start to consider, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to exist beyond, I'm doing things for the enjoyment of this life and the next life. What about, what's that is going on to the next life? The awareness or the inquisitiveness of the soul goes up a notch. And then there's another section of the Vedas that helps those people, the Gyanis. And then from the Gyanis, they may not, of course, but they may come in contact with the devotee and become interested in eternal life, not just I exist eternally. And that the eternal life is in relation to Krishna and so forth. So that the bhakti principle has a gradual approach or it can have a direct approach. So that's the benefit. All of that's the benefit of those who are worshippers of demigods, if they're going to receive or achieve the transcendental position. Of course, it requires association with a devotee to even have a clue about that, because otherwise one isn't going to have a clue. They go on thinking, and in the material way, even in the material way or limited way of what the goal of the Vedas is. So Krishna is covering bases in a whole series of verses. Don't stay stuck on the platform of the bodily enjoyment, and don't go to the upgrade position of aspiring for worship of the demigods, getting stuff here and going to the planet of the demigods, enjoying for a long time, etc. And that supposing people aren't followers of the Vedas, that consciousness exists for those who aren't followers of the Vedas. They work hard, so they get some money, so they go on vacation, party when they're on vacation, and the time is up and their money's up and they go back to work. It's just a smaller circle of time. And the larger circle of time is this one. But Krishna is pointing out the foolishness or the limited and temporary nature for those that don't want limited and temporary pleasure. We all want pleasure that doesn't get interrupted with time. But time interrupts it. It's the time energy specifically that sends one back down. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I have two questions. So I was thinking when we had the discussion, this heavenly planets also a part of material world.
Oh, yeah.
So there is also dualities.
Oh, yeah.
But in the scriptures, we hear more about like so many pleasures, enjoyment, all that. But then there's not much talk about there is difficulties too.
Well, I don't agree that there's not enough talk about there are difficulties too. I disagree on that point. It's both are mentioned, especially our the Bhagavatam and our Bhakti scriptures. They do limited and temporary, like Bhagavad Gita, and then there's details of limited and temporary in the Bhagavatam again and again.
Obviously, the heavenly planets have more enjoyment compared to earthly life.
Yes, but limited and temporary still.
But why is earthly life is more favorable or...
why is which life? Earthly life?
Earthly life is favorable
because
for
it's
devotional.
Not too nice. And, when you go on vacation, are you thinking devotees may be thinking, but, most people when they go on vacation, it's party. It's pleasure time. So that's what happens in the heavenly planets. Abundantly, they're indulging themselves in pleasures. And in the earthly realm, it's less pleasurable. So it's one is more alert to the unhappy situation that we found ourselves in, and we want happiness, and it's not here. So it's more conducive, in one sense. Go ahead.
Guru Maharaj, my next question is, you mentioned that Krishna is slowly trying to elevate the consciousness of Uddhava to the point of Avaduta Brahmana. That's what he's doing.
Well, it's in this section, he just spent 3 chapters explaining to Uddhava what the Avaduta Brahman said. Now, our Acharyas comment that this chapter 10, following 7, 8, and 9, is Krishna explaining how to. So yes, Krishna wants to, or our acharyas explain that Krishna is now explaining how to achieve that state of elevated consciousness, because it goes back to the question from chapter 6. It's a how-to question from Uddhava, how to overcome undue attachment to family life. And because that undue attachment is an obstacle in thinking of you and understanding you.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. We are reading Canto 1 and Chapter 3, different types of incarnations by Supreme Lord. And one of the incarnation that we were reading is Dattatreya. It is not directly mentioned, but the Uddhava, Krishna was teaching to Uddhava about Avaduta Brahmana, get transcendental knowledge from the 24 Gurus. So I heard that from other lectures that the Avaduta Brahmana is actually Dattatreya. So is that correct?
It's correct. Okay. I mean, it's correct because our acharyas confirm it. And their reference is not from chapter 3, it's from Canto 2, chapter 7.
Okay.
In Canto 2, chapter 7, it specifically says who Dattatreya spoke to. And King Yadu is one of the ones.
Right.
So it's inductive, or they have that realization either way. So yes, it's confirmed.
Thank you.
Hare, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So my question is going off of Mataji's question. So I think you were mentioning that here in the earthly realm, it's easier to remember. I guess it's easier to
Easier to understand. There's a lot of misery here.
correct. So and in the heavenly planets, I guess people get distracted by their happiness or the amount of pleasure.
By the sense pleasures.
Correct. So then, in the hellish planets, is it the reverse of that? So is there just so much suffering that it's hard to remember?
That's a nice question. Yeah, what's your practical experience? When you're, whatever the situation may be, that's really miserable. Now, if you're pious, that, difficulty lends to remembering the Supreme Lord more. But if you're impious, it doesn't. It has the reverse effect. And that's what it's like in the hellish planets. Now, it's a detail that's important. It's not, it's a detail. The hellish planets are not the 7 lower planetary systems. The hellish planets are below the 7 lower planetary systems. And in the 5th canto Bhagavatam, it gives details of 28 of those hellish planets. And then the statement is made, but there's actually unlimited numbers of hellish planets. And so there's no opportunity for anything other than suffering in the hellish planets. It's, the descriptions are so horrific. They're just praying, let me out of here. I'll take anything. Life is a worm. Yes, get me out of here. Life is a bug. Yes. And so then one is placed in one of those positions in the 14 planetary systems. Probably not a very high one. So specifically, the hellish, your question was not the 7 lower, but the hellish planets. It's just suffering. It's just suffering. And there's no piety. They're not like, take me to the heavenly planets or take me to God. Get me out of here. The 7 lower? There's different characteristics in the different 7 regions. And a general description it's called the subterranean heavenly planets. There's opulence. They have facilities like the heavenly planets, subterranean heavenly planets. But there isn't light of the sun. It's dark. It's below Bhumandala, so it's artificial light entirely. It's like night all the time. But there's long duration of life and sense objects that they try to be the enjoyers of. In the lower 7 lower subterranean heavenly planets, that's what it's called in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's English translation. And they don't have a sense of passage of time because passage of time is measured by movements of the sun. There's no sense of passage of time. So that it seems like it's just going to go on forever. And then kaboom, death. So those are some of the general, if you're interested in the more specific, it's right there in the Bhagavatam. You can read description.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So my question is that Buddha is also an incarnation of Vishnu.
Who is?
Buddha, Lord Buddha.
Buddha is also,
Yeah.
yes.
So those who are followers of Buddhism, they are also chanting some mantra.
They're chanting Buddha mantras.
Yeah. So because I've heard that whichever form of Vishnu you are attached, you go to Vaikuntha. So like follow.
Wait, whoa. You go to the planet of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
You want to
follow.
know, does Buddha have a Vaikuntha planet? Is that your question?
So like followers of Buddha also they go to the spiritual world.
Oh, no. I mean, there's different followers of Buddha, right?
Okay.
And some think this and some think the other thing, and they all kind of different followers of Buddha. It's really colorful.
Okay.
The teaching is nirvana, not Vaikuntha. If they follow him, that's his teaching. And nirvana is sometimes described. So it's subtle, and not completely clear, even for those who have studied it carefully. What to speak of those that haven't? It's not completely clear. But the nirvana realm is neither here nor there. Nirvana means cessation of material existence. And where is there no material existence but not spiritual existence? The river Viraja. What's the river Viraja? It's the causal ocean. What's the causal ocean? It's the ocean in which Mahavishnu reclines. And on the other side of this universe, what's there? The causal ocean. The universes are like footballs floating in the causal ocean. And what's on the other shore of the causal ocean? The Brahmajyoti. So it's not in the Brahmajyoti, it's not in the material world. Where is it? It's in the river Viraja. This dividing between the spiritual and material. So that's one sense of where they go. Neither here nor there. They enter the state of nirvana, cessation of material existence without shelter. Now, there's other ideas and other ideas and other ideas. If you're interested in the topic, one of the two GBCs for China, his name is Chandrasekhar. He was a graduate of the Bhaktivedanta Academy in Mayapur when he was a young boy from Australia. He was sent to that, and he grew up and he graduated from that school, and then he became a leader, and now he's a GBC member, lives in Hong Kong, married to a Chinese woman. And his occupation is he's a professor. He's a kind of, Brahminical scholarly type of person. So because it comes up a lot, if you're asking, imagine what people ask in China. What's the deal here? Followers of Buddha, where do they go? Which is kind of the question. So there's a little essay that he wrote, and it's not conclusive. The only scriptural authority person that has written on this is Prabhupada's sannyas guru. His sannyas guru was Keshava Maharaj. In Keshava Maharaj's writings, he has explored what it does say in the Vedas in different places about Buddha, where he comes from, and those who follow him, where they go to, and so forth. And it's not like completely clear. So be prepared for it. It's not completely clear reading of something that's not completely clear. Anyone else? We're going to go online.
This is from Uddhava Bhakta-das Prabhu. My understanding is envy in heavenly realm exists at subtle level like name, fame, power, beauty, etc. rather than material resources. Is that correct?
It's not clear what he's asking. Is he asking, is it only subtle and not a real place? Is that what he's asking?
Yes, Maharaj.
That's a real place. There's the subtle and the real place. It's both.
Move on to the
I
next.
think so.
Okay.
If I've not Uttama Bhakta, if I've not understood your question correctly, send it again.
Next is from Shashireka Devidasi. In 5.20.33, it is mentioned, if you follow Vanaprastha nicely, you get 100 times birth of Brahma. Oh, Brahmana.
Ha,
It says,
thank you.
but Brahma goes to, but here it mentions Brahma. But Brahma goes to Vaikuntha in one lifetime, then what is the context of this? That's a question mark.
That's the question?
Yeah.
Well, is it say Brahma or a Brahmana?
Actually, she mentions Brahmana. Brahma.
Okay. Brahma does not necessarily go to Vaikuntha.
Okay.
There are many sources of where one can become Brahma, and there's many possible destinations after. Shashi Rekha, send me your question through email, and I'll send you a little document that has some detail on that topic.
This is from Rupavilas Prabhu. We learn the godly qualities come to those who are devotees of Krishna. We also see demigods are surrendered to Krishna and serving in their capacities. So my understanding is that there is more chance of perfecting their lives in higher planets. So why the demigods have to fall down by exhausting their punya? Or majority of residents of higher planets fall,
Or
or majority
okay.
of residents of higher planets fall to lower planets, or only few of them fall down?
Generally, they fall down. That's the indication we have from Bhagavad Gita. And why they generally fall down, we've already explained. Their consciousness is that got them there. The consciousness that got them there was piety mixed with material enjoyment. So they got their material enjoyment fruit. Now they're in the enjoying mood, and the bhakti takes the backseat. That's common. And now the other is possible. They can continue going upward. But that's less common. And the example we've already given. When people go on vacation, when they go to, Disneyland, they're not there to, have kirtan and worship the deity form. They would go to the pilgrimage place for that purpose. It's like a vacation land. Largely. It's viewed that way, and it's interacted with in that way, largely. Now, they're more pious, and so they have more facility to go upwards, but that's rare. That's the exception, not the rule. Next.
Next is again one question from Shashireka Devidasi Mataji. Following on Mataji's question about the Buddhism, followers of Buddhism, do they take birth again?
Well, anyone that doesn't take shelter of the lotus feet of the personality of God takes birth again. So the followers of Buddhism take birth again. Maybe after a long time. But, the desire to just squelch desire or get a dagger out and stab desire to death, you can't, because it's of the soul. That's the Buddha's teaching, is stop desire. So you stop desire by repression of desire. But after the repression of desire, spirit subsides, desire awakens, and one again falls down. So their buddhi is not fully matured. It's still avashuddha. They haven't taken shelter. That shelter means service. to this personality of God. It's not just a liberationist mood, it's a service mood. And that's what needs to be emphasized in the teaching and the discipline. And that's not so much their view. Next.
That's it. That's it.
That's it. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.